Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've written before about the good grocery store where I worked in high school. We had a couple of bad customers and a lot of senile seniors, but it was well run with a great manager. The one I worked at for one summer in college was a bad place. It was 1994 and a chain grocery store with a truly awful manager who was straight out of business school. He was also the regional office director's son, so he was Teflon. Anything that went wrong got pinned on an assistant manager or hushed up at the regional level. Awful had managed to install his mistress as one of the assistant managers, and I only saw her in the store twice, and both times she was shopping. One of the times, she didn't even pay. Awful paid no attention to people's time constraints. We had a bunch of teenagers there who were attending summer school. He didn't care. He scheduled however he wanted and left us to swap shifts among ourselves. I personally saw him tell one girl she'd have to miss school because he needed her on shift and she couldn't find coverage. Crazy illegal, by the way. He didn't care about legalities. Awful's belief was that if the computer would accept it, then it was fine. It was the early days of computerized payroll, so the system would take literally anything with no checks. He made the teenagers work hours they legally couldn't. I'm talking too late, too early, and lots of overtime. If they complained, he threatened to fire them. That was his answer to everything, and work wasn't easy to come by in that area. There were teenagers in tears because he wouldn't let them take time for family vacations, or they were being forced to miss tests at school. One guy was fired because he went to his sister's wedding. He'd warned Awful about it months in advance, and it was a holiday weekend, so nobody could swap. Awful was very rarely, if ever, in the store his entire shift. He'd clock in, get a few really important things done, then leave. He'd come back in the middle of his shift to do the bank deposits, then be gone again until it was time to clock out. He assigned all his work to the latest fall guy assistant manager or other random employees. If he was the only manager on duty, he'd leave his badge for overrides on a desk in the office so we could grab it when needed to override register errors. All of this was massively against company policy. I mentioned in a previous post how National was pretty obsessed with mystery shopper reports and got them directly from the company that did that stuff. We get all kinds of conflicting instructions because the nation's ethics based on those and our regional director's policies would differ. Always fun. What I didn't mention was mystery shoppers were trivial to spot. They would go straight to the bakery to price out a special order cake, then not buy it, complain about the price, or ask any of the normal questions. They also went to the bathroom, the fish counter, asked for a price check, and made us unring something they decided they didn't want during checkout. There were other things on the list, but those are the obvious ones I remember all these years later. My last week at this crap show before I headed back to college, I spotted a blatant mystery shopper, complete with no pad. Awful had bugged out shortly after opening. The mistress was probably busy with something, and the other assistant manager had been fired for the last colossal screw-up. The only other cashier on shift was at lunch. It was pretty dead as it was late morning. So no big deal. Except that I decided it was time for this crap show to get reported for what it was. When Mystery came up with her price check item, I forgot to hit the price check button and rang it up for real. Whoops. Time to go get the manager's override badge. I overrode it, then I tossed that bad boy so hard it went all the way across the manager's desk and down into the sea of cables behind it in the corner. Whoops. I'm quite sure that if you went to the tapes, this looked incredibly intentional. It was my last week, and you could count the craps I gave on no hands. Somewhere around this time, the other cashier, we will call her Jenny, got back from her lunch break, and I informed her that crap was about to get real. She might want to go home sick if she wanted some cover. Nah, Jenny giggled and wanted the front row seat. Besides, the lunch rush was coming. We had a construction area nearby, and a lot of guys came for the prepared foods for a cheap hot lunch. We started to get the lunch rush and more of a crowd by the time Mystery made it up to my register to check out. Of course, she needed me to unring something for her checklist, so I flipped on the Help Me Obi-Wan light. Nothing happened. I called for Awful over the intercom by manager first name/last name. Jenny got on real fast and told me to just go get the badge from the office. Awful first name last name must be doing the money drop or something. I pointed out to Jenny that was against company policy. She rolled her eyes and told me that's what Awful first name last name had said to do. Now where was that override badge? I headed up the office and made a good show of looking for it. Called down to Jenny asking if she had it. Nope. Jenny abandoned the big order she was ringing up and came up to the little office to give a cursory look around. This is where the whole story took a turn I hadn't gamed out. See, I was just going to give Mystery a very bad visit with many violations to report. There would have been an embarrassing reaming from National and possibly even an investigation. Jenny had other plans though. Jenny was going nuclear. Jenny apologized to the mystery shopper, but she was going to have to get in Jenny's line now. I couldn't void the transaction or log into 2 registers at once, so I was going to help her back it up and Jenny will get to mystery as soon as she could. Now this is somewhat crap. While true as stated, we all knew how to unplug the registers to get them to reset and log us out. It was a dumb hack, but it worked. Thing was, there was almost zero chance Awful or Mystery knew that. Mystery must have loved her mystery shopping gig because she was the most cheerful screwed over customer you ever did see. She smiled, assured us everything was fine and scribbled in her notebook the whole time. Literally while I'm loading up Mystery's cart at my register, Jenny accidentally rang up a gallon of milk about 6 times. Whoops. No override card. No manager. No hit cashier with any power either. Cost-saving cuts there the Awful made early in his days before I arrived. We apologized profusely to the customers, but explained we had no idea where Awful was. Offered to check in the back, sent a bagger out to check the lots in case Awful was on a smoke break. No joy. As this fiasco rolled on, we had a lot of very unhappy customers on our hands. And the downright giddy Mystery who stayed to the bitter end. We were demanded to call a manager. We tried all Awful's known numbers. Who's above him? Oh, that's regional. We were not allowed to call him. Very strict instructions. True and very against company policy from manager first name last name. But we can give you their number. Phone's right over there. Many took advantage. We also got yelled at a lot, but in spite of some sympathy for the customers, we were loving every second of it. Regional took about 2 hours to get somebody down to the store who could clear the registers. Nobody else in the store had permissions on that system. Awful still hadn't showed up. Regional dude overrode the registers, but by then the damage was done. We'd missed the whole lunch rush. No hot food was sold. Our metrics for the day were going to be unbelievably crappy. Regional dude was on the phone frantically trying to figure out how to cover this mess up for his boss, Awful's father, and decided to blame it on a computer outage. I think they intentionally broke some equipment to help sell that story. Offer rolled in after I clocked out, but I am told Regional Dude was still there doing Awful's job. Awful was unbearable for the next couple days, but I had a foot out the door. Jenny, it turned out, simply didn't care because she's been doing the work of a head cashier without the pay. It took a few weeks for the fallout to happen, and you bet I kept in touch with Jenny to find out. From this point, I only know what Jenny told me as I was back in college, a few states away. A few weeks later, an audit team from National came down to investigate. The mystery shopper story hadn't lined up with a computer outage story, and something was obviously hinky. They dug into the books and found all the labor violations for minors working overtime and too early/late. Interviewed the employees and found out about the scheduling during school time problems. Manager absenteeism, no vacation is allowed. Also that the store was constantly short-staffed. No crap, people ran for the hills as soon as they got anything else. Finally, an assistant manager who was on payroll full-time but nobody had ever seen her work. She clocked in and out within seconds of the assistant manager every shift he worked. But was never there. Them dots ain't hard. I don't know if they covered up all the labor violations or not. Probably that would have caused massive fines. I was too young to know to report them. However, Awful, his father and his mistress all got fired or resigned quietly. The store reportedly went back to being pretty functional after that. Jenny got a better job and left within a year. I never worked retail again. This occurred in an auto body / mechanic / towing shop. Owner got a call about a tractor-trailer combo that tried to turn around in a schoolyard and busted the trailer hitch. Owner brought the trailer back to the shop and found the part. It was an old army hitch, and finding the parts took 2 trips to town, 40 miles away. Repairs took the best part of 2 days. The company was based out of Colorado, aka Not So Nice Western Lumber Company. And when the owner finished the repairs and called the lumber company boss, who said, "Just bill us and we will send you a check," 2 weeks later, owner got a check for 1/2 of the billing, marked paid in full. 3 years later in winter, owner heard the bang out on highway and a tractor-trailer unit coasted to a stop into owner's parking lot. The name on the door? Not So Nice Western Lumber out of Colorado. The driver couldn't understand it. The engine was running, kinda, but it wouldn't pull. Owner finally found out the crankshaft had broken right in the main bearing between 3 and 4 cylinders. The front half was running, but not the back. The owner pulled the tractor into the shop, let the driver stay there in a sleeper cab, while the company sent out a mechanic. Young guy knew his stuff, pulled the crank, replaced it and all the bearing and so on. Tractor was ready. The owner was too. Company was called and the lumber company boss said, "Just bill us." The owner declined. Cash up front. The bill was horrendous. Towing, use of the shop for 13 days, tools, phone and so on. The lumber company boss asked if this had anything to do with the previous affair. The owner replied, "Of course not." Lots of phone calls between the mechanic and the lumber company boss. The trailer, by the way, was parked out front with some 2x8s under the dolly as the ground was wet and soft. The mechanic, laden with instructions and overloading his butt, goes out to the tractor, starts it up and runs it up under the trailer, but in a hurry, forgot to connect the air hoses and set the trailer brakes. He hit the 5th wheel fast, bumps the trailer off the 2x8s and sinks the dolly in the soft ground. The owner parks our big tow truck crossways in front of his tractor. That unit is not going anywhere. The owner locks the tow truck, pats his 38 in his belt, smiles at the mechanic, and walks inside. Lots of phone call occurs, and the cashier's check arrive. Some context and backstory. I still live in my parents' house since my university is really close, so I don't need to give myself an apartment. The story happened about a year ago. On a beautiful sunny morning, I got woken up by my mother telling me that she had invited my aunt with her kids for lunch. Now, to be honest, I never liked that particular aunt that much, but what can you do? So about 2 hours later, the family came over. We have our lunch, and afterwards, we sit around in the living room and chat about it. At some point, I noticed from the corner of my eye one of my aunt's kids go into my room. Now, I had my computer open and I was a bit afraid that he might do something to it, so I followed him. Now, that kid was about 8 at the time and he should in no way be allowed to play violent video games. And me being an avid gamer, most, if not all of the games I had installed were rated as PG-18, meaning they were to be played by people over 18. The conversation went like this. "Do you have any games?" he asks me. "I do, but they are not for you. These are grown-up games." "But I want to play." "I'm sorry, but you cannot." At this point, the kid runs out of the room and to his mom. "Opie does not let me play games," he says to his mom. The entitled aunt says to me, "Come on, let him play some games. He has nothing else to do." Well, the games that I have on my computer are not for his age. They are violent and disturbing at times. But my little boy wants to play. Can't you let him play? "I'm sorry, but these games are not for your child." "Excuse me, we are guests here. How do you have to do what we say? Just let him play." At this point, I've gotten really angry, and in hindsight, I should have just opened the Flash Games website and let him play. But this computer was my most prized possession. Having built it myself was mostly my own money, and I would not let an 8-year-old play freely with it because I was afraid that he could damage it. Also, my malicious compliance sign came out at that moment, so I did not pass up the chance for some good old malicious compliance. I say okay to both mom and child and take the kid with me. I open Outlast. For those who don't know, Outlast is a horror game with many disturbing images and scary scenes, especially for an 8-year-old child. And I let him play. Not even 5 minutes in, I hear a scream from my room and I see the entitled kid run crying to his mother. What the hell did you make him play? What's wrong with you? I told you before, my games are not for young children. They are for adults, but you wouldn't listen. The mom straight up picked up her children, one still crying, and left the house. After I told my mom what exactly I did, she burst out laughing. Learn to listen to people when they warn you. I used to work for a car rental company. I won't say which, but the name accurately describes the employee's daily experience working for them. During my time, the company continuously changed policies regarding debit cards for rentals because of the large amount of fraudulent transactions associated with them. This caused much drama with customers, in particular with return customers who hadn't been in since the policy changed. Around the end of each school year, many people rent minivans or SUVs to pick up their kids and a bunch of their stuff from college. I had one such customer who did not qualify for the rental vehicle she reserved. For my training, I was not allowed to rent anything larger than a sedan because she did not have a credit card. When I informed her that I could only give her a Hyundai Elantra, she became enraged. She stated that the previous year she was able to rent a minivan under a debit card, and I informed her that the policy had changed since then. She refused to acknowledge that I was doing my job properly. I repeated company policy multiple times and did my best to inform her that I was doing the best I could with the current situation. She refused any attempt I made to placate her. My manager eventually stepped in and he broke down and did a rental for an SUV, against company policy. The entitled woman smirked at me and pushed a stack of post-it notes that was on a counter in front of me. She said, "You should not be in customer service and I'm going to report you to corporate. I want you to write your name on this paper." Without missing a beat, I took the pad and wrote the words, "Your name," on a top sheet, ripped it off and handed it to her. Apparently she didn't notice until she was in the parking lot with my manager and her husband to inspect the vehicle. When my manager came back in the office, she said her husband, who stood silently behind his raging wife throughout the whole interaction, wants me to write you up because you didn't give them your real name. Then he started laughing and said, "But I'm not going to do crap because you followed the company policy and you did exactly what that witch asked you to do." She gave us a horrible survey and it tanked our bonus for that quarter, but it was still totally worth it to put that rude woman in her place. Around Christmas time, I bought myself a new motorcycle. I figured I would use one of my unused credit cards for gear, gas, and so on. I made a few online charges from reputable retailers in preparation for a 900-mile trip in a week. After my trip and about 30 credit card charges later, I get a fraud alert from Bank of America and the text detailed the last 5 charges. All gas stations. No biggie, I made them. The next day I get a call from the fraud department asking about $2,100 in charges. I flipped. They refunded. They contacted the 2 retailers, new credit card, but was told it's been handled. I was pretty sure I hit a skimmer. Fast forward a month later, I get another charge. Turns out there is some Visa agreement that retailers can force charges through even with old numbers. So I call up retailer number 1 and the automated system recognizes my number and greets me. I've never even heard of this company. It wasn't my name. And I've had my phone number for about 12 years. So I say yes and have a nice robot give me an order history. Sure as heck the date and purchase amount match. So I get an operator and ask to verify the address because I never got it. Address turns out to be a specific country importer. I figured it was bogus. Then it's hit me. Skimmers won't get a phone number off a Max trip. That narrowed it down to 2 transactions I did over the phone. One was Geico, the other was a motorcycle parts company. Now the company we will call MPC was based out of New Jersey. Coincidentally, that's the shipping address. So I call retailer number 2, give the credit card number used, the shipping address, and he pulls up the order. I am pretty blunt with him about why I am calling, and I was able to squeeze out the phone number. New Jersey area code, so I do a reverse lookup of the number. I have a number for my thief. So after more digging, I found her on LinkedIn, and she listed MPC as her employer. Next step is I call MPC, and guess who answers? I asked for a manager, and he's conveniently out of town. She left a note and my callback number on his desk. Next week I call again, guess who answers again? Guess who's also in a meeting? I give it one more shot the next day at 2 p.m. or so. Plenty of time for lunch, meetings should be done. Surely he's there. Nope, he wasn't there all day. At this point I know she's recognizing my phone number and screening my calls. So I grab a Google Voice number and put myself in Alabama. Call back around 4 p.m. and in my deepest, most southern accent, I asked for the manager. He was helping me and we got disconnected or some sub-story. Sure thing. I finally got a hold of him. So I lay out my case and evidence. He's shook and feels betrayed. It was the name of the customer service manager. He let her go the next morning after she confessed to it. So next, I stroll down to the local police department, file a report, give them everything I have. Detective giggles and looks surprised. I'm pretty much handing her on a silver platter and forwards it to whatever New Jersey precinct so they can file charges. A little background information. I come from Denmark, and in Denmark, employees are not allowed to interfere if they see a shoplifter. They should just call the police, and they are definitely not allowed to physically interfere. So, as I said, I live in Denmark. So, when I was around 13 years old, my friend and I were visiting the local chapter of one of the biggest store chains in Denmark. My friend and I was just there to buy some chips. But when we were about to leave the store, one of the employees says, "Please come with me to the back." I guess I was caught off guard because it took me a little too long to react. So he grabbed my arm and led me to the back. We followed their order and emptied our bags, and to his surprise there was nothing. Then the other employee said, "What about the pockets?" Then they searched our pockets again, coming up with nothing. They sat there for a while before they opened the door and left. We sat there for a while waiting to be told you're free to leave. But after about 10 minutes, one of the employees just came in and said, "What are you still doing here? Get out." The rest of our day goes by without anything happening. When we told his parents, they laughed it off. Had to spend the night there, but when I came home and told my dad, oh boy, he just got this evil smile. I went to the car without saying anything. I remember I just thought to myself, I can't miss this. So we drove to the store and my dad just stood in line waiting his turn. The store is pretty busy. When he finally stands in front of that poor 16-year-old girl, he just says, "Hey miss, I would like it very much if you could bring your manager out here." The manager, who had nothing to do with the incident, comes out. And my dad just goes off on him, yelling about what happened. The manager was one of those slick types who thought their silver tongue could get them out of anything. And he just went on and on about incidents like these happening, and that it was very unfortunate, and that he was going to talk to both of his employees. My dad sat up that whole night trying to find the number of someone who mattered, and he called about a dozen people and told them what happened. The next day, he is called by the head of the Nordic division. My dad explains the situation and goes into detail about what happened, also regarding the manager, because apparently the way he acted was a breach of protocol. Both employees and the manager were all fired. Because of our laws, first employee was charged with physical assault of a minor, and the second one was charged with assault of a minor as well. Both were found guilty, and both were made to pay very hefty fines. Just to start this, hurting a child to get revenge on the other parent is a horrible thing to do. Too often people forget that the child is the most innocent person when parents slip up. Do not take your hate for them out on a kid. That being said, no child was harmed in the making of this story. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the story, shall we? My ex is the very definition of an entitled person. She fakes a disability to get a check, has never worked a day in her life, and has always expected everything in life handed to her. Now, all that being said, I hold none of that against my son. It isn't his fault that he was born to this crazy situation. When our son was born, her bubble of spoiled rottenness extended out to him. For a while, I didn't blame her. She wasn't ever supposed to be able to carry a child to term, and I wasn't supposed to be able to father anymore. I had a vasectomy after my third son was born. So yeah, got this one tested, and yes, he's mine. But as always happens with the entitled people, it was never enough. And eventually, we split. Now I pay a healthy amount in child support, more than the courts would actually order. And I pay on time, every time. It's enough that even after food, clothes, and other expenses, she still has plenty left over to spoil him, even if it's not up to her wants. Recently, she began to complain about the fact that when I buy him presents, they always stay with me. I have him 3 days a week, but she wants his entire toy stash to go back to her house during her 4 days. I refused. She continued to whine, and I fumed about it to my new wife, and a plan started brewing. I agreed that from now on, I would send the half of what I got him for holidays to her house, and it could all stay there. She was proud of herself. Easter was coming. I had already bought my normal bounty, mostly consisting of outside toys. I had water guns, balls, bats, a giant outdoor ball and set, and a liberal sprinkling of candy. I went shopping again, this time with my wife. No outdoor toys this time, knowing that she would not take him out to play with them. No, this time I went a route that would suit her musical and artistic child. He loves playing outside in the dirt, by the way. You just can't keep up with him when he does. I went musical, loud, and as obnoxious as I could. A recorder, noisemakers, laser guns, made a dozen different sounds, and enough candy to put a bull moose into a diabetic coma. Enough to equal the dollar amount I spent on his original basket. Every bit of that went home with him after he had a nice long day of running around outside, happy as a clam. She of course was thrilled seeing the volume. Her little prince was getting a quadruple Easter. My parents also gave him a basket. Hours later I was informed that she didn't want me sending things home if that was the kind of toy I was going to bring him. He was running around the house screeching through the recorder, powered by a combination of chocolates and pixie sticks. He absolutely loves the recorder. It's not so bad when you let him play with it outside. The story happened a few years ago in 2015. The setup. I was a screen printer. I accepted a new job at a different shop for $13 an hour. Slightly better wage than my old job, and the place was much nicer. Let's just call it Waldron Sports Center / Apparel. They operate out of a large space in a local mall, featuring a sports / joke apparel shop, multi-purpose gym, and a single automatic press in the back where they printed their stuff. Two brothers, let's call them Jake and Jarrett, own the company. Jake does most of the on-site management as Jarrett's more busy with other careers. They are running a squeaky clean M&R diamond back press. The shop's super well organized. It's very climate controlled, whereas my previous place was just a plain warehouse with no heat / AC whatsoever that would often surpass 100 Fahrenheit. Schedule is perfect, and paychecks are directly deposited every Friday too. Another huge plus. Obviously, I'm excited. First 2 weeks went fantastic. The second Friday I got my first check. It seemed short, but I started the mid-pay period on sporadic hours, so whatever. 1 week later and my next check is significantly larger, but it's off. I go to Jake and ask him about seeing my pay stubs. He tells me that all of that is handled through an outside company, but Jarrett should have gotten my login information by then. He will be back on Monday. I asked the other printer there if that was normal with the pay stubs, and he said not really, but vouched for the two, saying they probably just forgot. First thing Monday, I go to Jarrett and asked about the pay stubs, who tells me that's actually Jake's responsibility to make sure I get the information I need. Okay, what the hell? So I go back to him and ask him about it, and he says that he will call the company and get my login information ASAP. Suspicious, but not having much other option, as I was already almost a month removed from my old job, I go to work. A little while later, he comes in and gives me the login information. We finish the job and take a quick break. I log in and check my pay stubs, and it turns out these guys are paying me $8.10 an hour instead of the 13 that I was promised. Oh man, I am livid. Obviously, I gotta confront Jake about this. Never been through this before, but I'm sure I know what's going on here. I quickly Google conversation recording law. See, Ohio is a one-party consent state, meaning if I'm part of a conversation I record, it's both legal and admissible in court. So I set my phone to do just that, put it in my pocket and go confront the dude. Hey, so I checked my pay stubs and you're only paying me $8.10 an hour. Would you like to tell me what's going on here? He looks kinda dumbfounded, shakes his head, then says, it's supposed to be $13 an hour. Well, you've been paying me $8.10 an hour and you owe me over $400. Well, that's not supposed to happen. I'll call him and see what's up. So I go back to the shop, stop the recording, and start setting up the next job to pass the time. I am holding out hope that this is all just a misunderstanding, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Regardless, I gotta at least play ball while I follow through. Jake comes in and says, we'll have your money fixed on your next paycheck. With back pay? I ask. Yes, it'll be on a check. So I begrudgingly wait for the next week. I woke up Friday morning and checked my bank account. And much to my not surprise at this point, another minimum wage check and another few $100 they owe me. So I decided to stay home that day. I get a text 15 minutes after the time I'm supposed to be there. Jake says, hey, this is Jake, what's going on? I say, you just sent me another minimum wage check. You owe me $700. I am not coming in until you pay me the money that you owe me. Well, I was going to write a check for the difference, but I accept your no-call, no-show. Thanks. Well, that's not how this works, dude. You still owe me $700, and now I have this text from you admitting it. No more responses. So I do as my millennial would. And I leave a negative review on their page and start commenting on every single post they have, which gets deleted immediately. I got a text from Jake. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Is your mother's address still correct? I never told him any personal details about family or living situation, and this jerk wants to assume while literally stealing what would be rent money. I tell him, cool, call them. They better have my check ready. The revenge. I have the dude cold. I basically have a concrete admission of guilt from text and audio evidence. Now I just gotta figure out what to do. I send a message to a troubleshooter reporter who made his career exposing these exact kinds of scams. And he tells me that without signing an employment contract, I'm pretty well screwed, and that maybe I can try small claims court, but that probably won't work out, and apologized for being unable to help. I looked both Jarrett and Jake Walden up in the local court of clerk websites just out of curiosity. Turns out Jake's been sued multiple times for his exact thing, and he lost twice. And then it hits me. I'm in a band and have paid Facebook to promote posts advertising my concerts before. It's cheap and it generally gets some results. At the time at least. I created a Craigslist post detailing this exact story, and I included links to his and the company's court records as a centerpiece. I made a page on Facebook called Former Employee. I make one single post. Avoid Waldron Sports Center /apparel. Dishonest employer. I then sponsored the post. I put in $15 over the course of 10 days for ads, and I targeted them directly to people who liked their page, any of our local sports teams, screen printing, or the mall itself, who lived specifically within a few miles of their shop. Within a couple days, the post had been shared over 2,000 times. I got a message from him 4 days later begging me to take it down, and a check for every missing penny 2 days later. I went to the bank to cash it and told the two cashiers at the counter the story. We shared a laugh because both of them had seen the post that morning. I sent him a message saying I got the money, next time don't try to scam somebody who's much smarter than you. That felt good. I continued to share my story anytime it was relevant to a public post. I guess he saw one a few months later, messaged me again and said, we already gave you the money. Please stop. I told him I gave you so much opportunities to do the right thing and you still went out of your way to be a piece of crap. You shouldn't have done that. Go screw yourself. And that felt even better. Okay, so I had this really nice lady as a boss in a sales job. I'm in a different job now. She was the sweetest soul ever and would always get us coffee when we got to work. She had a heart of pure gold, but that wasn't enough for the leash of a corporation the business I used to work at was. They were the most scummy people on earth. Just imagine Mr. Krabs' money obsession on steroids. Half of my workforce got fired due to budget cuts. Thankfully not me because I was a pretty hard worker. But then I got a new boss and oh boy, was he a nightmare. He made us get to work an hour earlier so we get ahead of our schedule. He also made us stay behind late for the same reason. I barely ever got any free time to myself because I was rotting in a tomb that my new boss called an office. To be honest, he made me want to quit and also made me wonder, what the hell am I doing here? I could be outside, but instead, I am sat in front of a monitor, making some sales. What has my life become? He made me hate my life. Then they got really scummy. They got rid of another half of our workforce again because of their budget cuts. They fired my best friend who I made a pact with to always have the same job as her. She got a job as a cashier because nobody was hiring. I couldn't leave my job and I felt trapped. Can I tell you what was really scummy? Because there was only 25% of our workforce left, they were making me do 2 different jobs and then extra 3 hours because they couldn't afford to keep their precious workers in the industry. My boss started to treat me like crab with a cherry on top and make sexist jokes and even touched me inappropriately once. It was so misogynistic and so damn rude that I just couldn't take it anymore. I went into a mental breakdown at home and cried myself to sleep for a week. The boss also had the nerve to not pay me for 6 months. He came up with excuses like, we have a few setbacks, we will give it to you next month. No, we're sorry, we're all tied up at this moment. I had rent to pay, damn it. I got paid roughly $3,300 a month, but after that, I had to rely on my parents to help me pay my rent, buy my food, get transport through trains and so on. This isn't directed towards the boss but towards the entire company. I am not naming any names, but they are the worst corporation ever. So I was slaving away at my job again, and my boss told me they were firing me because I was lacking schedule completion or whatever. I was pissed. I almost killed a guy. It was so overwhelming and infuriating. Screw these guys. Now for the revenge. I had no idea why I didn't do this before, but I had gotten in contact with a lawyer. He understood it all and was in my favor, and he agreed to take on the case. We had gathered every sample of evidence on how I was unpaid for the past 6 months and had to live off of my parents. It was horrible. I felt so bad. It felt like I was stealing from them. We were certain we were going to win the court case. We had every bit of evidence to get my money back. Court trial day, I was not suing my crabby boss but the CEO of the company for around $20,000. The CEO tried to bribe the judge with $500 but it didn't work. The judge apparently passed it off as, sure dude, I'll definitely be in your favor. My lawyer is friends with the judge surprisingly enough, and the judge told him after the trial case. Okay, so the judge starts talking yada yada yada. Then he asked the CEO to give evidence that they had paid me. They had none. They didn't even think about forging documents. The judge was displeased and went on to me and my lawyer. The judge told me to show evidence and I did. I whipped out tens of pages of documents with unpaid bills and also said that the company has a reputation for killing its workforce. The judge had all the evidence he needed and it went in my favor. This went over the local news and I got $20,000 in return. Thanks so much, CEO. Really appreciate it. I bought a used car and paid off the next few months of my rent. And all thanks to the CEO. The CEO's company died and went out of business because clients heard about my court case and they were disgusted that a company would do that. The company went out of business because nobody would buy from them and they had a bad reputation in general. I, however, got my PhD in English and I'm now an author for a book series. I can't say which because I'm not allowed to advertise.